Committee to order. Changes to the agenda. As you know, the only change we have is we have a resolution that will be added. Chair's report. I don't really have a chair's report. I'm just going to say that we're going to have presentations today from INHS and the other one, Habitat for Humanity. Proposals for the Sear Street area, and that's a major component of our business today. Public comment. Do we have any public comment? Not seeing anyone or hearing anything. We'll move on to minutes approval. Need to have someone move the minutes for October 14th.
Move.
A second.
I'll second them.
Okay, there were seconds. Thank you. Comments? All in favor?
Got to call a roll.
Okay. See, Rich is in here, right? Okay. Mike Lane,
Yes.
Leslie,
Yes.
Deborah.
I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know if I can vote yes or not.
Okay. Now I'll vote yes. So that passes. Okay. Katie, I'm going to ask you to kind of officiate and introduce these people because I don't know any of them.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. So I think people remember at the last meeting of this group in mid-October, Department of Planning and Sustainability was charged with going out and speaking to the entities who had community housing trusts within Tompkins County. We did that. We had meetings with INHS and with Habitat for Humanity and spoke about the possibilities of the site on Sear Street. I believe all the legislators were forwarded a letter written by Habitat on November 5th outlining that they were declining the property on Sear Street, the potential to work there just due to the small nature of the organization and small staffing that they have. So INHS is the entity that we will hear from today, and they're going to outline their thinking. I don't think it's a fully fleshed out proposal at this point, but it's got some meat on the bones for you to talk about and raise additional questions, and they're here to answer them as well. I think perhaps I will start with Joe Bose. Joe, do you want to introduce your team or take it away, or however you want to take it for the next step?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Joe Bose. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development with INHS. And I'm joined by Leslie Ackerman, who is our Community Housing Trust Project Manager. And we are going to just present a very quick concept for redeveloping the lot, the parcel on Sear Street. First, I'd just like to say, INHS is thankful to the legislature for considering us for this parcel. We're very excited about the possibility. We think it's an incredible location for sale housing. And so I'm just going to share my screen here. We have taken a look at the lot and the parcel and the zoning, and what we're proposing is 4 permanently affordable new units, either as 4 single-family homes or 2 duplexes. That's just initially what we felt fit on the lot comfortably. We don't think we would build any more than 4 units. But the kind of configuration, whether it's duplexes or single family homes, I think is still open to some discussion. But no matter what, basically we would build some smaller 2 or 3 bedroom single family homes that would fit in with the character of the neighborhood. We're proposing that we would enter into either an option agreement or a purchase and sale agreement with the county that we would execute once we put all of the financing together and the county is in the position to sell the lots. We know that we will need to pay fair market value as that is determined. And we've done some research internally based on what we've been purchasing property for. And I know that'll be a discussion, but we're at least in our initial budgets using $120,000 for the parcel based on some of the recent purchases that we've made. So we have here just a basic street view of Sears, and the parcel is here, 6.2 on this map. Please feel free to ask questions as I run through this, but we put together a schedule just to give you all an idea of how long it might take to do something like this. We are assuming that the transfer of the property would happen at the end of quarter 2. Well, at the end of quarter 2 of 2022, that's when the legislature
No,
could approve.
We lost your presentation screen.
Oh,
Sorry.
Sorry, I moved it. Is that better? Okay. So we are assuming that the county would approve the transfer in quarter 2 of 2022. And we'd like to talk about that a little bit. But if that's the case, what we'd like is some indication that we have the ability to get started and that we would be selected as the purchaser of the property so that we could start working with an architect and an engineer at the end of this year, beginning of next year, to start to actually design the site, figure out what the buildings would look like, do a zoning analysis, and then start to work through the municipal approval process, which we assume will take anywhere from 6 to 12 months. It shouldn't take quite that long in this case because this should be pretty straightforward for single family homes. But, you know, being that it's in the city of Ithaca, we like to say it's on the order of six months or so. Construction would take about another 6 to 12 months. And then it's been taking us 3 to 4 months to sell the homes once we put them on the market. And that's in the city of Ithaca. We found that these homes are actually selling very quickly, you know, within sometimes weeks, at least going under contract within weeks. It often takes a couple months though to close. We put a schedule in here on when the applications for funding are due so that you had some sense of when we could apply. But the funding that we would be looking at is the Community Housing Trust, the county's Community Housing Trust, the City of Ithaca home funds. And then we would be making an application to the state of New York for some funding that they're going to be rolling out in the next year that's going to be specifically for sale housing. And we've had some good conversations with the state of New York about that, about this project and other projects that we're working on. So this is just an example of what 4 single-family homes on the lot would look like. We understand that the county would like a walkway through the site. So in this case, we put a walkway right kind of in the middle of the homes, but it could be at the bottom or the top.
Joe, I got a question for you. The 120K, is that for the entire lot or for the individual lots?
That's for the entire lot. So,
May I ask a question, Mike Lane?
sure.
Would you consider if the county kept title and gave you a ground lease? Much as Cornell does with their houses up on University Ave, for example.
Well, the issue with for sale is that INHS is using a ground lease to keep the property affordable. So basically, when we purchase the property, we continue to own it, and then we lease the improvements, the home, to the homeowner, and we enter into a ground lease with that homeowner. And that ground lease basically says that they have to sell it to another income qualified buyer. And that's how we keep it perpetually affordable. So I'm not sure how another ground lease would work in that scenario.
I'm thinking that perhaps you could be a sublease of a ground lease.
INHS would sublease from the county.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry, INHS would lease the property and then we would sublease it to the owner.
Right.
If that's a legal way of doing it that, you know, our attorney says is fine, I think we would be open to that if that's preferable.
Thank you.
So this is an example of 2 duplexes, just to give you a sense of, you know, another option. Again, you know, we have an architect in-house who looks at the zoning and makes sure that things fit, but we would take this and then bring it to our design team that we retain and further develop. So these are just examples of single family at the top and duplexes at the bottom. The last picture here is 402, 408, which are 4 units, but just a sense of the type of housing that we build and what we would use as a starting point for this site. And then we put together a pro forma based on construction costs that we have currently for a duplex that we're building on Plain Street. We're about to go under construction this month on a duplex. And so these are really up to the minute numbers based on construction costs, which are coming in about $271 a square foot. Hard to believe, but the acquisition price that we talked about. So for 4 units, we're looking at about $393,000 per unit in today's dollars. Ideally, when we go under construction, the cost would come down based on, you know, hopefully people think the supply chain issues and the lumber prices and things are going to come down. But this is based on if we had to build it today. And you can see at the bottom here, the sources that we have. INHS purchases the land in this case, and then we raise funds through New York State. There's some nice CERTA rebates because these are Energy Star rated homes. We've also been certifying them as LEED. We are now building them all electric. So there's no fossil fuels in these homes. And we get a rebate for NYSERDA for doing that. We have the Tompkins County Community Housing Development Fund, IURA funds, and then we have a per unit price right now at $174,000, which it comes in at about 73 or 4% of the area median income. That's somebody would have to earn that in order to afford the home.
I'm
That's my
sorry, Joe,
presentation.
what did you say the income level to buy that house? What did you,
It's in the mid 70% range, like 70, between 73 and 75% of the area median income. And that's where we start out, and then we sort of adjust the price based on the location and the size of the home, and often who the buyers are. But that's where we've modeled it at the moment.
thank you.
Okay, does anybody else got any questions? Could you please speak up? Dan?
Yeah, Dan Klein here. I was wondering, so I have an interest, not everyone in the legislature shares this interest, but I have an interest in maximizing the amount of space that would be still available to the county on the county-owned parcel. And so to that end, I'm wondering how creative can somebody get in making those houses and those parcels as skinny as possible?
Well, there are setbacks. So,
Zoning.
I'm trying to remember if you could build 4 units on one lot, but you could put these 2 duplexes together and push them all the way up. In this case, would be east, as far up on the screen as you can, and you would leave maybe that bottom parcel. It sort of depends on, what really we're purchasing. We'll figure out what we can build based on the amount of space we have, and there is always the possibility of a variance if, but a variance is something that's subjective for the city. We don't tend to like to try and get variances if we can avoid them, but we do have a pretty good record of getting them for home ownership projects.
Thank you. And again, I'm not speaking for the whole legislature, but it would be something I'm going to keep asking about. So, as to the degree to which you can factor it into, possibilities, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Joe, you can take down your screen now if you want.
Sure.
Yeah. Martha,
Thank you very much, Dave.
I was first, but you're probably close.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Joe. Joe, you said the 120,000 for the entire parcel. Is that what, I know it's, a parking lot with some bad looking arborvitae on it. So that's the appraised value or assessed? Where'd you get that cost, that price?
We used the property that we purchased on Plain Street. We're building 2 duplexes, and we bought that for $65,000. It's 4,800 square feet. We then basically said, so that's about $30,000 per unit. And that's typically what we find we can raise the funding for. But Leslie, help me. I think we then backed into the amount of square feet on this site. And if you use that, it comes out to be 120,000, right?
Yeah, we looked at the existing parcels. The parcel on the map of the presentation Joe showed, the parcel in question, isn't a parcel as it currently exists. It's sort of a reconfiguration of several existing lots. The one that's currently 117 Sears Street, we looked at that one, which is almost the exact same square footage as our lot on Plain Street. And that one's currently assessed. I don't know that an appraisal has been done, but its land value is assessed at 70, which over a couple years, since we bought Plain Street a few years ago, over a couple years from 65 to 70 seems like a reasonable appreciation. However, as we are in a market where construction costs are extremely high, land values are often going to tend to come down in that environment. So we looked at all these factors together and said, and then took the price per square foot, and over the size of the lot 6.2, that worked out to be in the mid 100s, which we then took down to account for the currently really high costs of construction. So we were trying to weigh all the factors, both comparables with what we've purchased, the current assessed value, and the market costs right now, and put all those together and looked at that as 120.
Okay, and Jay Franklin took put his camera on. I'm guessing he might have something to say about that.
Yeah,
Indeed.
the 120,000 is way too low, to be quite honest. You're looking at $65,000, $70,000 a lot. Just because INHS is only going to put one unit on these lots doesn't change the market value of that. So if they're able to put duplexes on lots and come to a $30,000 per unit land value, because they are deciding to only put one unit on this lot, doesn't change that land value of that parcel. So if you look at 4 lots, you'd be able to sell those 4 lots for $280,000. And now you just got to back out developers' profit, cost of dealing with the city to do that development. So I'm not yet set on a figure, but I'm going to be more than what INHS is proposing, simply because they're not utilizing each parcel like they do other parcels.
Okay, all right, thank you. On the question of the ground lease, Mike, I guess I would just comment that if the idea is to sort of preserve the county's future eventual rights to reclaim the property, I don't know that that's kind of the message to send to a homeowner who wants to buy sort of permanently affordable home. So I'm not sure I would go with that. Just one quick question, Joe. From your diagram, there were little pink lines that were inside the parcels. What was that?
Those are the setbacks. So you can't build over those lines.
Right. Zoning.
Okay. So the lots are bigger than the required setbacks? Is that what your diagram showed?
The zoning says if you have a lot that's 68 by 77, you can't build on the entire lot. You have to have a 5-foot setback on the side, a 20-foot setback from the rear, a 10-foot setback from the front. So when you look at all of that, you can build in that box, in that pink box.
Oh, and the parcels that you've designed are, am I correct? Those are as small as they can be?
Well, we put the setbacks on that the zoning requires, and then we put buildings on that fit within there.
Okay.
You could build bigger buildings if you wanted to, as long as they're within that pink box. Once you go over that box, you need a variance.
Got it, I guess. All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Deborah,
Yeah, I'd like to get back to this issue of the lease from a different perspective. Your property taxes are a big piece of what it costs to live in a house that you own. And I'm just curious to know what impact, when you have a ground lease, what impact that has on the assessed value of the house for the purposes of determining how much tax you pay. Maybe Jay can answer this.
So all of these properties, I would assume, would fall under their housing trust program. So we petitioned the state a few years back, and we got real property tax law 467-J passed, which allows me to assess these properties without taking into account the land value and only the improvement value or their maximum resale value. So if they're going to sell it for $174,000, that's what the property owner would have their taxable value based on, even though the house is probably going to be worth $400,000.
So no one pays taxes on the underlying real estate.
Based upon that section of the law. Now, if we go to one of the Cornell ground leases, Even though Cornell still owns it, they rent it to a taxable entity, i.e. just a typical homeowner. And in that lease, the homeowner the homeowner is responsible for the taxes on the land and the improvement. But when they buy that improvement, they're only buying that. They're only buying and not the land. So if the property is worth $450, the land is worth $100, their purchase price is only $350,000.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, but I don't think if we had a ground lease and we leased it to INHS, that it would negatively affect that exemption. I doubt it would affect financing, but that's more, I mean, Cornell does it all the time and it doesn't affect them.
Thank you.
Leslie,
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. A couple of questions. First of all, I appreciate how you've laid out, I know this is a first pass at what the potential layout could be, but I think the setbacks would be greatly helpful. Stitching this street back together into a residential street would be amazing for Sears Street. I am looking at the other side of the road. There are about 11 homes on the opposite side of the street. This side of the street's a bit shorter because of Cascadilla running on a diagonal. One question I have is about the density. I think 4 is maybe about right, but we might want something slightly denser or less so. The idea of collecting it all onto one parcel seems kind of lopsided and might throw off the flow of the entire streetscape. So I'm not sure that I'd be keen for that. I'm interested in what you see as some of the biggest site constraints. I know that construction costs and kind of variability right now is a huge unknown and constraint on the project, but are there any particular site constraints that we should be thinking about as we think about this parcel as well as the Tioga Street side that you've noted in sort of this early design work?
Well, one of the things that we've been talking about internally is could we do this with modular building, manufactured, where we, in that case, they're built in a factory and we bring them on site on a tractor trailer basically, and we crane them in place. And that could reduce the cost. That's what we did at 402 South Cayuga. And if that was the case, we'd probably want to set up on the Tioga side. So like having that parking lot available might be really helpful. If we just built this stick built, kind of like a typical home is framed, you wouldn't necessarily need to be on the parking lot side. You could be on the street. But I think one of the constraints is the size of that street in terms of vehicles coming and going, and it's going to be a bit disruptive for the time that it's being built. But otherwise, we haven't done a phase 1 to see historical use. I'm assuming the county did that when they purchased the property, but it's a flat site. I don't see it's much issue other than that staging kind of question that really would come down to, does the county still own that back property and is it still available like it is today?
as it stands right now, we probably still own that property. I don't see any reason to keep getting rid of that. The question that is going to be most important is timing, because if we build a new office building, we're going to need staging area for our stuff as well. So it's a timing issue, basically. It's kind of above my pay grade right now. I think by the time this all happens, somebody else will be in charge. So anyway, let's see who we got. Annie, you're next.
Thanks, Dave, and Joe, thanks for the presentation. So I'm looking at the map of the other properties, well, the whole area. It looks like most of the other houses on that street and around that area have some type of driveways. It looks like the ones you're proposing right now, they wouldn't have driveways or parking, is that correct?
No, they would have driveways. We just don't show them.
Oh, they would, okay. All right, that'd be great to be able to fit them in.
The zoning requires off-street parking, 1 space per unit.
Okay, great. And so I also like the idea of trying to have a balance of retaining as much of the bigger parcel of property, but I think we need to balance it with what makes a sensible lot. And what I'm seeing in the area is these would be smaller than most others in the area. 20-foot backyard isn't much. I mean, it's better than nothing. I've seen a couple of properties, just only a couple, really 2 or 3 that I've seen anyway in the city, where you walk back and there's nothing. But most properties have, a small area, and 20-foot would be enough to have possibly a little garden or for kids to play back there and to hang out. So I don't think that's the size, to me, is not excessive of the lots. And I really appreciate you trying to figure out how to do this with the constraints of the increases in the construction costs. Did you say what the price would be? You said what it would be, who would be eligible as far as the median income, but did you say the price of these units that they might be?
174,000 is what we have at the moment, which equates to about 74%. That means that somebody at 74% of area median could afford it.
Okay. And yeah,
I would add to that that's an average over the 4 units, taking that pro forma Joe had shown. And if we were doing a mix of a couple of 2-bedroom units and a couple of 3-bedroom units, the 2-bedroom units would be a little lower than that price point, and the 3 bedrooms would be a little higher.
okay, good to know. Thanks, Leslie. And yeah, the last thing I would just add, a minor thing, which would probably be, I think we'd be wanting that walkway closer to Court Street, just because if we use that for whatever the future purposes of the main part of that lot, say if it's parking for county employees or something else, some other use, we'd probably want just the walkway closer so that we wouldn't be having people having to walk further down, so they wouldn't be they wouldn't be taking a shortcut where they shouldn't be. So otherwise, thank you very much for the presentation.
Okay, Mike, you next.
Rich hasn't spoken. You want him to take him first, or you want me to go ahead?
No, you're in line.
Mike Lane again. As to Martha's point on the ground lease, well, there's going to be a ground lease no matter what happens, Martha, and that you were a champion of that to get this assessment program that happened, which was a good thing. Having an underlying lease would not change that, and I don't think it would discourage anybody from wanting to purchase a house that's qualified to do that. One thing you can think about if we do a ground lease is maybe we don't have to charge as much for the property because we're maintaining something. Now, we've just heard Jay say that the amount was just batted around here by INHS, it'd be too small. But maybe that or even less, and this is just me talking, might be reasonable if we had the ultimate control of the property underneath. It would be obviously a long-term lease to have it a ground lease, but that might be a reason to see how we could help a little more with the cost of construction. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Rich John.
Thanks, David. I was just going to comment on the staging. From the standpoint of the residents in the neighborhood, I think almost certainly the county and the developer would have to come to an agreement for coordinating staging from the Tioga Street side. Sears Street is just too narrow and residential to have regular truck deliveries there. Just something for us to think about. Thanks.
I would agree. I live in the neighborhood where I'm seeing on a daily basis the construction over the at the site of the old Mimi's Attic, Mama Goose, as well as our project at the former Immaculate Conception School. And there are so many trucks parked on both of those streets, and it's a daily challenge to navigate. And those are streets of normal width. So I think we would definitely have some disruption for the neighbors if we were going to have construction going on there, keeping in mind that it's, you know, potentially 8 or 10 months.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be pretty tight no matter what happens. Just getting a semi in and out of that parking lot is a pretty good trick. So, okay, Martha, you want another shot? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I would think that it seemed just a quick look at the drawings, the duplexes give you more green space around the buildings, obviously. But I would think that details like the walkway and how big the backyards are and that kind of thing, would be worked out over time. I would think also the staging, knowing how long a lead time the county has before the county is prepared to start building an office building. I think INHS would be way ahead of the county in terms of the timeline. So that could probably be worked out. I guess the thing that feels like maybe the stumbling block is the purchase price. Seems like 120 is pretty far away from Jay's ballpark. So I'm not sure how we,
Well, I wouldn't say I would just say that we haven't made an offer of 120,000. We're just saying that's what we think is based on our analysis. We wouldn't, if the county wants to sell the property for more, we would do another pro forma and see if we can raise more money. I mean, we raise money based on, from a various number of sources. We could increase the purchase price to the home buyer and make it, affordable at 80% instead of 74%. We could ask the Community Housing Development Fund for more money. We could ask the IURA for more money. The state of New York is basically tapped out in this. But, if you increase the price, we will go try and find more money from another source. We think that we basically built the pro forma to be sort of what we consider reasonable and based on our experience. But, if Jay comes up with another price, we'll take a look at it. And we wouldn't want to say that if it's not 120, we don't want it. There are trade-offs though. If you increase the price, we increase the whole project cost and we have to go find that money, but that's what we do for a living. That's what we're good at.
Right.
Some of that may come back from the county through the Community Housing Development Fund.
Right. Which pocket?
Right.
I think we're required to charge fair market value for it. So whatever that is. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Rosalind, you're next.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan, for following up on what we asked, and Megan, Katie as well, and Joe Leslie for the information. I've just been listening to what's transpiring. I'm trying to picture the street, and if I remember well, most of the housing on there, and Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, are standalone single family houses, which I'm a big proponent of. I understand the duplex option, but I would much prefer the first vision that you showed of, 4 individual units. I think often what happens for, and INHS has been very good at, providing that sort of a mix, which is much appreciated. But often what happens is, people who are low income and buying low income property end up having to, buy the property where they're conjoined with the neighbor, the duplex or to something, and not necessarily just a standalone property that you can walk around. So I would much prefer that that's what's happening down there, understanding all of it. Dan, you scared me for a minute when you started talking about the skinniest. Again, for the very reason I'm talking about, that it doesn't have to be, that way. We have, space that we can put, decent housing for people, low income or not. They should feel good about being in that space if it's not so skinny and it's, all of those things. So I just wanted to weigh in and say, just because it's that, let's please do consider that it can be something really good. And thank you very much, Annie, for talking about yard space. I've been in way too many meetings where people don't feel that having a little bit of yard space is necessary. And I strongly believe that it is incredibly necessary. If COVID-19 hasn't taught us anything, people need to just be able to step out of their house and sit outside for a minute. I think it's very necessary. So thanks for the preliminary drawings. I know that's not set in stone just yet, but I'm open to having more conversation and seeing where we go from here with that. And that was a quick turnaround. Man, y'all are good at this stuff for real. It's like, wow, already there's like renderings of something. Well, thank you.
It's helpful having an architect in-house.
I know.
to clarify for all the legislators, we don't want you to give the impression that there's plan A with 4 standalone and plan B with 2 duplexes. In our ideal, we'll have the flexibility to work out what's going to fit the best and be the most affordable, rather than being locked into we want this or we want that. A consideration on our end is that it will cost more to build 4 single family homes than to build 2 duplexes or 2 standalones and 1 duplex, for example. But the character of the neighborhood and the benefits and amenities to the homeowners are a part of that entire calculus.
Deborah Dawson.
Yeah, I think Leslie's right when she said that there's a calculus here. You got to weigh and balance a lot of factors besides our individual personal preferences about setbacks in backyards and single family versus duplex, in order to end up in a sweet spot in terms of what's affordable. And my inclination is, to make a decision about how much we're willing to sell this property for, and then trust that INHS, which has been in the business of providing affordable housing for decades, knows its market and knows, what's going to sell on Sears Street in Ithaca. I don't think that we need to be micromanaging the design aspects of this. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Dave, I'm going to jump in because Deborah, I hear you. And I'm sorry, I have sat in way too many meetings where we're talking about low income housing, we're talking about affordable housing, and it's always, those folks why do they need a yard? They're getting a house. Why do they? So this is not micromanaging. This is just setting it out like it is, real lived experience for people. Like I said, I value what INHS does. I don't want to micromanage what they do, but I also want to make sure that I am voicing what is of concern and what comes across often, sitting in some of these places and hearing it and living it. So I just want to put that out there. Yeah.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, Leslie Shaw.
So just one last thought, and this is for all the legislators online and thinking longer term about not only this site, but the site behind it. I would urge folks to think about density. We are a block and a half from the central business district. Access to TCAT, might be able to live without a car pretty easily right here, get to work. If there is a possibility to make sure we get more housing units here while keeping the character of this neighborhood and offering people a real home ownership experience that's affordable, I would urge the creators and the creative juices and the design folks to think about this really seriously, the entire area. This is Rich's area, district, but I'll nudge in since it's a block away from mine, and it's long been my commute to work to walk up Cascadilla Creek and cross the little pedestrian bridge and Sears Street to the county for years, and then up to TCAT to take it up the hill since then. It's beautiful, and it's really a great neighborhood with a lot of walkability, parks around it, stores nearby. How can we make sure that people can have a slice of this life? And so I would just say, please be creative and think about density, folks.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, Annie.
Thank you. Just to follow up on what Leslin was saying, that as a home inspector and being in homes and around homes quite a lot over the past umpteen years, it is something that people are wanting and feel like a real sense of, hey, I've made it, but just like I'm like a regular person, that I can have a backyard. And to have to not, when people are, whether they rent or own, if they live in a place that's conjoined with another building, there are almost always more issues with your neighbors, and there's issues with using the outside. People are less likely to use the outside of their house. So, but on the other hand, I do agree with what was said as far as trusting INHS. They've been great partners. I just wanted to make sure we were giving them enough, that we would give them enough property, a slice of a property to do something that was really equitable to the people that would be living there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you guys very much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. It's been some good discussion around it. I think the legislature needs to get together and discuss this amongst ourselves and figure out exactly what we want to do. So at this point, I think I'd like to call it a day, and we'll hold a special meeting to sit down and discuss all this another time. I see Martha's got her hand up again.
Surprise. Leslin does too. Leslin has her hand up.
Leslin was first.
Oh, Leslin, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead, Leslin.
Thank you, Dave. I know this is not part of the discussion, but I believe next door to what we're talking about, land space, is also a house. I'm just planting a seed that INHS might want to keep their eye on as well. And that used to be my district before redistricting, and it went over to Dave. And I know there's a house somewhere there that is pretty run down. So that might help give some additional space. Who knows? I'm just planting a seed. Thanks.
Okay, Martha.
Thanks. I kind of thought the committee was going to discuss the resolutions that planning had put together. Maybe especially the one that's to designate this as no longer needed for public use.
I'm not ready to do that just yet. I really would like to hold off until we've had a chance to put our heads together and really discuss this in a little greater depth. So I'm gonna table it for today, but we will move forward with it if everybody's in favor. We have a chance to sit down and talk about it.
Is that an executive session conversation, or is that, I
think it should be. I don't know if it can be. I have to get that.
Since it's a discussion of real estate, negotiations or whatever. I guess, is that a question for Bill or Lisa?
That is executive session.
So the committee could go into executive session right now. It's only 10:04. If that's to move the conversation along.
Hearing that the chair is ruling that he wants to do something differently, so I'm gonna look to the chair.
Well, I've asked to set up a special meeting on 29th to discuss this, and I've asked that it be sent to all legislators so that all legislators could attend. And we can do that in executive session, that's fine. It still gives us time to get it on the docket for December. So I don't see any reason not to go that direction. That's really strong objections from someplace.
Yeah, let's just do it once.
That's the way I feel about it.
Katie's got her hand up.
Katie, go ahead.
I'm a little confused right now, but are we talking about an executive session now or at the 29th?
29th, Katie.
Okay. I do feel like at least I need to understand a little bit better what our proposal guidelines are going to be for INHS for this proposal that we're hoping to receive from them in time to be able to review on the 29th, or are we backing away from that part of it completely at this point?
Well, originally we were going to make a decision between INHS and Habitat. Well, Habitat has dropped out, so the only player in the game is INHS. So I guess the decision is how we're going to put it together, exactly what we want to do. I mean, where we're at on the 29th, that was my plan. I mean, we can do it sooner if everybody can get together at an earlier date, but that was the best open date that there was. And I personally don't feel ready to make a decision on this at this point in time. I think we need to have some more discussion and kind of beat it to death for a while. Okay, Leslie.
So Dave, I want to make sure that I'm hearing you right. This is our first time, seeing, potential, what could be a potential proposal, from INHS. It was just preliminary, giving us an idea. I'm hearing needing some time to just sort of digest that, to talk some more, to clarify about, sale price and all of those things before we jump into a full-fledged decision that yes, we're moving forward. I need to just go ahead and develop, fully run with it, so on. Is that what I'm hearing from you? And so you want a meeting on the 29th to have that conversation?
Exactly right.
I just want to make sure, because I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, I bet you are, because I don't talk that loud to begin with. And
Okay.
so, no offense taken, okay?
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm gonna have to duck out of this meeting, but I will make myself available for the 29th, and hopefully we'll make a decision then that we can share with Katie and the folks at INHS that, this is where we'd like to go.
Yeah, I don't have any problem going ahead with this down the road, but I want to have it thoroughly talked about and everybody feeling good about where we're gonna go. And I think we found out a couple things today that we didn't know. Nothing particularly bad or anything like that. I just think we really, it's a big decision to sell that strip of property, in my opinion, and we should talk about it a lot more before we do it. But I think we can do it in one meeting and get it taken care of and get it all fleshed out. So, Martha?
Why don't you take Rich ahead of me? Go ahead, Rich. You're on the committee.
Sorry,
Thanks.
Rich,
I was just going to point out, we were talking at the IDA today that we need a special meeting, and they floated several different times, but one of them was on the 29th. So we just need to be careful we don't create a new conflict.
29th at 3 o'clock is what I've asked for.
I think that would be fine. I think it was 1 o'clock on. I'll look for that. Go ahead, Martha and Leslie.
I think what I heard Katie saying was that we should be clear right now with INHS what questions we have outstanding. What do we need to hear back from them, either in writing before the 29th or at that meeting if we want them to come to that meeting. But what are the gaps in our knowledge and our, what else do we need to make this decision? I think we've also already decided as a policy that we'd like this to be low moderate income housing. We'd like it to be for sale. And since really in the planning, Department of Planning and Sustainability laid out very clearly that there are only two players in town. And so this is the only player. So what else would INHS need to bring to the table to help people to make the decision, I guess is what I hear Katie asking for.
I don't know, at this point in time, I honestly don't know what more we need from INHS.
Price.
Other than an agreement on the price, which has got to come through Jay.
Well, it seems like I think the board, the legislature could pass a motion to enter into negotiations. I mean, I think is what we would usually do, like empower the administration to, set some parameters and empower administration to negotiate. In other words, the committee is not going to work out every little detail, usually.
No, we're not going to work out every detail. I wouldn't have a problem making a motion to allow Jay Franklin to negotiate with them on the sale price for the property.
Well,
to come to the thing. Go ahead, Jay.
I don't negotiate. And that's not a threat or something. Value is what value is. So I'm more than willing to give value to Lisa in order for her to then be able to then do that negotiation back and forth. But
That's fine. That's fine.
I can work with somebody else on that. Sorry, no threat. Just
sorry, Jay.
Could I
Don't want
ask
to put you on the spot.
Could I ask a clarifying question? I'm not sure if it's a question for Jay or the legislators or some of the county staff, but Jay is going to come up with a number that he believes reflects market value. And I know the county is required to sell the property for market value, but in a typical sale of a typical property, whether residential or commercial or bare land, market value is what sale price you end up agreeing to, right? So the property could be appraised at X and you might sell it for a little bit more than that or a little bit less than that. And as long as you're within a reasonable range, everyone would probably assume that that's market. So if Jay fixes on a number, are we going to be looking at that is the market number that we can run with or not? Or is there going to be still some room for that discussion or negotiation, which Jay, as he has said, isn't the guy to do?
Well, I'm gonna say that that's probably the number from what I'm hearing from Jay. I don't know what kind of a tolerance he can put on that number. Jay, do you care to speak to that at
Yeah,
all?
so what I'll be determining is the market value of that property. When one buyer and one seller agree to a sale price, that is just the market price for that. So there's a difference between what one buyer and one seller will agree to. But I'm determining what a typical buyer would agree to sell to a typical buyer acting without any undue influences. So sometimes they are the same. In this market, we're seeing a lot more market prices being higher than what an appraiser can support. So there are differences between those two terms. So I'll figure out what the market value is, pass it along to Lisa, and then we'll work on negotiating what a sale price would be.
Okay, Mike, Lane.
Jay, would you also be able to give us a value if we had a ground lease of it and we didn't do an actual sale?
Yeah, you kind of intrigued me there and got me thinking as to that. Most of the ground leases I see, there's not really a purchase price, but there's a monthly payment that's typically done. It's tied to a CPI or something like that. So yeah, let me think about that, Mike. And
yeah, I mean, I could see it being, if it's a long-term lease, it could be a very small payment, for example.
It could be. Typically, they'll continue on for the 99-year lease, but it could provide a more discounted per year payment as opposed to having $210,000 up front, which may make it easier to manage. So yeah, it's intriguing enough to me that it got things rolling. So yeah, let me play with that too.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Martha?
Katie's waiting. Katie, go. She had her hand up first.
Yeah, I've been trying to just think through what we would need to help the legislature make this decision. And I think we'd need to know from INHS's attorney whether a ground lease is something that is even workable on your end. And I'd be curious to know from INHS what the pros and cons of a ground lease arrangement would be in terms of your various funding sources, thinking about the community housing trust, thinking about selling the properties now or closer to the end of the 99-year time period. Like what, I think that we don't understand that enough, and that would be great to understand it, as well as, Bill and Mike and Jay. That it's a new idea, so there's a lot of thinking that needs to happen. The other thing that I think we would need to understand is kind of what, Dan, to your point, what are we talking about? Skinnying down the property? What's the configuration? I think INHS would need to know the dimensions of the land we're selling them. And is there something the legislature would like them to sketch out? We've seen the sketch at selling the full frontage on Sears Street. Is there another sketch that you would like to see with different dimensional offering to INHS? And then the final point is just, is there interest in seeing it with a pedestrian path from the parking and without? And if that changes anything with INHS's proposed development. So those were kind of the main pieces, and I just wanted to kind of summarize those for your consideration.
Well, personally, I'd like to see the passageway be there, and I'd like to see it as close to the existing house on that side of the street as possible to get it as close to Court Street as possible. It needs to be at least wide enough so it can be maintained by a pickup truck. That's really the way I see it. I don't know how anybody else on the committee feels about it. If you have an opinion, speak up. Okay, Leslie.
Actually, I was next. Dave,
Okay.
if that's okay. Yeah,
Fine.
okay, I think, you know, a 10-foot wide walking path seems a lot too much. You know, maybe we need enough for a snow, you know, to get a snow plow, you know, a little sidewalk plower, but I'm agnostic about it. I was pretty convinced by the planning department's sketch that showed it's all of 10 feet longer to walk along Tioga Street. So that might really complicate the whole area design. In terms of privacy for the owners, I think that would really be a compromise. I was intrigued, you know, Mike, when you mentioned that maybe if we do a ground lease, we can write down we can sort of consider a lower price and therefore maybe the sales price.
Yeah.
And therefore maybe the sales price would be lower. I thought, oh, that sounds good. So Katie, I appreciate you're asking what's the, you know, INHS really has to put that whole thing into their thinking and come back with, you know, is that even feasible? And would it help reduce the sales prices? I think that, again, I think we really want to make sure that we're, you know, setting out what we're interested in, but allowing the developer to be the developer. I think as far as sort of saving maximum amount of space by skinnying up the backyards of those properties, I think you'd have to look at it. I don't think you could really compromise the yards without getting anything meaningful in terms of a parking spaces for the county. So I'm not sure that's a trade-off that would be worth it. So, all right, thank you.
Leslie?
To the questions around what further data INHS would need to provide a response, I would just ask if they noticed anything unusual or a constraint in the current, you know, proposal as far as the lot line, probably the rear lot line right now, the divider. If they think that they can develop within that space based on the setbacks, based on the kind of proposed general footprints that they develop, I would suggest that we move on from there because all of the other questions will be answered in design and it's too early to tell. I would urge folks to think again about this walkway. This is a small block. It's very easy to walk around this block. That's very typical sidewalk pattern for Olive Fall Creek and downtown is to have the sidewalks along the block, not an interior path, which does bisect and come by people's properties and will take up valuable development space that you might for people's individual yards or side yards or, you know, the driveways we were discussing. And we're not building, while we're parceling this off and hopeful to do something as a first phase here, this won't be done in a vacuum long-term. Something else will happen on the Tioga Street side. And once again, I would urge folks to think about density and not parking. Okay, I know that we need parking. Everybody needs parking, but I would urge us to think about high value land, real estate in downtown and not set it aside for superficial parking. It's a very low land use and it doesn't really benefit the community that it's set within to be a commuter parking lot in the middle of downtown. So food for thought for the long-term future. That is not what's happening here. But when we're thinking about rear yards and what it backs into, it will back into something different. And so how that feels, looks is yet to be determined. We do not have that context or fabric to understand today.
Okay, I guess what we need to do is for Jay to determine the value of the property, tell Lisa, and Lisa can negotiate with INHS. They should probably get back to planning with what that shakes out to as far as unit costs and affordability of those units. So that's kind of where I'm at with Megan.
Yeah, I just had a question in terms of the lease scenario, understanding, the part about trying to bring down the cost. But from the county's perspective, I think it'd be helpful to understand what our expectation of such a lease is. If it's originally set for 99 years, is that something we're willing to continuously bump out? Or I'd love to think we don't need any affordable housing and we've solved all of these challenges 75 years out from now. But when a home buyer or the homeowner goes to sell a house in year 75 and they have less than 30 years left on that lease, just to understand what that means, would the county be looking to continually bump that out to make sure that the homes can be sold further and further down or would we be looking to retake that property at the end of 99 years?
Can I respond?
Yeah.
The homeowner's only ground lease is with IHS, or INHS rather. The ground lease that I'm talking about would be INHS leasing the property from the county. So it really is not going to affect the homeowner. And we can negotiate anything reasonable as far as that. It could be $1 a year, for example.
Right, as long as if they need to bump out the lease, they would first need us to be able to bump out our lease with them, or they would not be able to extend the lease to the homeowner as we go further into the lease period would be the question I have. Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. Leslie had a question.
What I wanted to do was talk just briefly to the question that a couple people raised about the layout and the setbacks and the yards, to give you a few numbers that might be helpful in terms of looking ahead and whether we're going to include the walkway and how much more or less you want to squeeze out of the parcel. Right now, the proposed parcel has just under 160 feet of road frontage on Sears Street. If we're looking to design homes that don't require us to get variances from planning, which would be ideal because that's a process with some complications, then we'd need to have each home lot have 35 feet of road frontage. So 4 of them would take 140 feet. So we've got a little wiggle room. But if we wanted to have, a substantial walkway in there, it doesn't give us that much more wiggle room. Out of that 35 feet of road frontage, we need to have 5 feet of setback on one side and 10 feet on the other, again, to avoid a variance, which means you have 20 feet of house maximum width. That's a pretty narrow house. In an ideal world, you can get a house that's a few feet wider and or have a few feet more of yard space on either side. So the upshot is that every foot that's getting squeezed out of the width of the lot or that's being used for the walkway is a foot less of house and or yard space for the homeowners. I live in the South Side neighborhood. I'm looking out my back window. I just had the good luck of being able to move the fence that's around my yard. I moved it last year about 2 feet, meaning I have 2 feet more yard, and it's astonishing what difference that 2 feet on a small city lot makes in terms of my usable space. So that's what we're working with. We want to optimize the usable space, both inside and outside, for the homeowners. We can make a really small house, but if we have a few more feet, it gives more room to work with. It provides more storage space, more usable living space, and again, more outside enjoyable space for the homeowner. So.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, just listening to the discussion, I'm not sure we benefit by making it more complicated with holding land leases. I think we need to find a way to get to a sale. And I also echo Leslie's comments about wanting to make sure that these are attractive really functional properties. The other thing I'd say is, because I didn't say it earlier, is I'm excited by the presentation. I think we could do something really good for our community here and this particular neighborhood by making sure we get the right plan. But this is exciting. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, Martha, one last time here.
Lisa's been waiting.
Thanks, Martha. I just have kind of a procedural and perhaps a legal question. As the team has been meeting, the county staff has been meeting over the past few days and weeks to develop a path forward, and the planning team has developed selection criteria, standard selection criteria, particularly when we thought that there may be two developers between whom we'd have to make a determination. Now there's only one. My question is, do we still need INHS to develop more fully a proposal for consideration? Do we still need to follow some standard selection criteria to show that we've done our due diligence, rather than putting this out for, if the county's will is to provide permanently affordable for sale housing, and INHS is the only developer who's expressed an interest, it's basically a sole source kind of situation. But is there anything more that we need to do on the county side to ensure our due diligence in this matter? And I don't know who can answer that question.
Go ahead, Bill.
Just a brief comment. I've heard a number of very interesting questions and suggestions and proposals raised today, and none of these issues have been resolved. So it seems to me you as a board, as a group, have to come to a meeting of the minds of what's in fair play, what's not in fair play, to continue talking about this. So you get these issues lined up and then decided, and do it in a cumulative way. Because I hear a lot of good ideas, but I don't know if they're going to carry the day. So I'll share with you advice I've been giving to clients for 40 plus years. You can get a quick answer or a good answer to a question. Your choice is yours. And I think if you spend some more time here, sort of thinking about it, and you come back to another meeting whenever it's scheduled, I think you'll be surprised at probably how quickly you can resolve these issues and go forward quickly from there. So that's just based on my years of negotiating and watching negotiations, that I think you're really at too early a stage, even Lisa, to be answering your question right now. So I think people have to put their thinking caps on, come to an understanding of what they're willing to do, and then proceed expeditiously from there.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, Martha.
I guess I would, two things. I would, if we want to try to not repeat everything the committee does at the full legislature meeting, I wonder if there can be a quick doodle poll to see what time. Earlier, the November 29th or 30th were both floated for the next meeting. So I wonder if we might have a quick doodle poll to see when we get the most legislators to be able to attend. That's one thing. And then I wonder if Joe could put the screen back up and we look again at the designs. I mean, maybe it'll be a little more clarifying now that we've had these discussions. My quick look at it when, we looked at it so fast, it seemed like there was a lot more green space if you had duplexes. So the yards were definitely, the net yard space was optimal, it seemed, with the duplexes. But if it's okay to take a few minutes and look again at the designs, I'd love that.
Why don't I just have those sketches forwarded to the legislature, and we will discuss them on the 29th or 30th.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Very good. Anybody have anything else? Mike,
Move to adjourn.
all in favor?
Yes.
It's unanimous, yes, from everybody that's here. Thank you, guys. Thanks for all your help. And hopefully we'll get our heads all together and have something resolved after the next meeting.
Thanks very much.
Good night.